before sleep comes, let me tell you a story. A story from long, long ago, of a time when life was simple but survival was not. When fire meant warmth and bread meant hope. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and step with me into the past. My name? I'm not sure it matters anymore, but if you must know, they used to call me Edric. Edric, son of Hal. Born in the year of our Lord, I think it was 1324. But time doesn't flow the way it used to. Not after what happened. Back then, before the sickness came, life was already hard. The village I lived in had no walls, just muddy lanes and low huts, each stitched together with straw, timber, and prayers. We had little, almost nothing really, but we had rhythm. A rhythm to the seasons, the rising of the sun, the sowing of seed, the sound of hooves on wet ground. I was a farmer. My father was a farmer, and his father before him, all the way back to God knows when. We rose before the sun, always before the sun. Even in winter, when our hands were too cold to tie knots or lift the shovel, we rose. I remember the smell of wet hay and frostbitten soil, the weight of water sloshing in wooden pails, the sting of wind on my cheeks. That was morning, every morning. My wife, Milda, would already be up, feeding the chickens, kneading what little flour we had left into hard, dry loaves. She never complained. Never once. Even when the bread cracked like stone and the air stank of damp and dung. We had 2 children then. A boy named Ren and our baby girl, Isbeth. They were always hungry. But then, everyone was. Most days I worked the Lord's land. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Half the crops we grew, sometimes more, belonged to him, to the manor, to the system. We were free, yes. But what did that mean? Freedom doesn't fill the belly. There were days my arms ached so badly from turning the soil, I thought they might fall off. But I dug anyway, and sowed, and prayed. I remember one spring, we had no seed left, and I had to beg the reeve for barley scraps. He gave me a handful, and in return, I gave up our last hen. Milda cried that night. We had no eggs for weeks, but at least we had a little hope. Our food? Simple and scarce. Oats, mostly, boiled until soft, with a pinch of salt, if we were lucky. Sometimes we'd forage, wild, garlic, nettles, mushrooms, if we dared, meat, rare, perhaps once a month. If a pig died or we trapped something small, we dried apples in summer and kept them in sacks above the hearth, hoping they'd last till winter's end. And for drink, well, water wasn't safe. Too many bodies, too much rot. So we drank ale, thin and weak, but warm. And in the evenings, after the animals were fed and the children asleep, I'd sit by the fire and listen to the wind. It howled like wolves some nights. Others it whispered. But then, the whispers changed. We heard rumors, carried by merchants, pilgrims, travelers, whispers of death, black boils, whole villages gone. At first, we didn't believe it. The sickness was far away across the sea, in strange, foreign places. But then came the priest from the west, his robes torn, eyes sunken. He spoke in Latin, half mad with fever. He collapsed by the church steps and died that night. And with him, the plague arrived. Soft pause. It came slow. At first, a cough, a fever, someone too tired to rise, then the swellings. Dark lumps beneath the skin, painful, black, oozing. Ren saw one on a neighbor boy. He asked if it was a bruise. It wasn't. By week's end, that boy was buried in a shallow grave. And his mother and his sister, the priest told us to pray. So we did. He told us it was a punishment. So we repented. But the more we prayed, the more people died. Our village grew quiet. The birds stopped singing. Children no longer played. Even the dogs stopped barking. People locked their doors, shuttered their windows, crossed themselves when they passed one another. We stopped gathering in the square, stopped trading, stopped laughing. The air grew thick with fear. And then the bell began to toll. Every morning, another death, another soul gone. I remember the day the baker died. He was just there the night before, giving Milda an old crust of rye. Then in the morning, he was cold, gray, and slumped beside his oven, arms blackened. No one would go near him, not even the priest. We burned his hut, wood, bread, and all. I watched the smoke rise and wondered if we'd be next. Some fled into the woods, into the hills. But the sickness followed. You couldn't run from the air. It clung to your clothes, your breath, your shadow. Even the animals knew. The cows moaned, strange and low. Our dog refused to enter the house. And the birds, they vanished. One morning I woke, and the silence was so thick, I wept. Not from fear, not even sorrow, just silence. We tried everything. We burned herbs. We rubbed vinegar into our skin. We carried posies and garlic in our pockets. We tied toads to our chests, hoping they'd absorb the poison. Nothing worked. The church held processions. Flagellants marched through town, whipping their own backs, crying for mercy. But no mercy came. Then came the hunger. Fields went untended. The strong grew weak. The weak grew silent. Milda rationed everything. We ate moss from trees, roots, bark. One night, I found her grinding acorns into paste. She said it tasted like nothing, but we swallowed it anyway. I told the children it was a feast. That nobles ate the same in castles. They smiled, and I turned away so they wouldn't see my tears. Gentle pause. By now, you may be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Why bother remembering pain? But I believe there's something in remembering, something human, because when all else is gone, what we carry in our memory may be the only thing that remains. That was the beginning. Before the worst of it, before the dreams turned to ash, before I had to do things I never thought I would. But that's for another night. Rest now. Close your eyes. And when you wake, I'll tell you the rest of how we survived. Somehow. Part 2. The hunger deepens. Soft breath in, slow exhale. They say the body can go weeks without food, but the mind breaks much sooner. That winter, it was not the cold that nearly killed us. It was the emptiness. My son, Rin, stopped speaking. He just sat all day, watching the sky, or the fire, or nothing at all. I asked him what he was thinking. He didn't answer. Only once did he whisper, "Papa, where did the birds go?" I had no answer. We tried to bury the dead at first, but the earth was frozen, hard as stone, and there were too many. The bell stopped ringing. The priest had fallen ill. No one replaced him. Milda said we should stay inside, seal the cracks, pray, but prayer felt like shouting into a void. And God felt very far away. I ventured out one morning to search for food. There were no more markets, no traders, no bartering, just silence. The wind carried the scent of smoke and rot. I found a hut abandoned, its door hanging open. Inside, the hearth was cold, and on the table, a bowl of dried peas. I took them. I didn't ask permission. There was no one left to ask. I felt shame, but hunger doesn't care for pride. We boiled those peas for days, a little at a time, thinned with water, stretched with weeds and moss. We told the children it was soup. They didn't know the difference anymore. The village began to vanish. One by one, huts stood empty. A neighbor, old Greta, she wandered the paths barefoot, hair wild, eyes empty. She called out to people who weren't there. We found her one evening, curled beneath a tree, frozen, stiff. Milda covered her with a blanket, but it was too late. And then came the wolves, drawn by the silence, by the scent of death. I saw them once at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting. They knew we were weak. They were not wrong. I remember one night, Isbeth cried for milk, but there was none. There hadn't been for weeks. Milda held her close, sang her lullabies, even though her own lips were cracked and bleeding. I sat by the fire, staring into the flames, and I thought to myself, this is how it ends. Not with a scream, but with a whimper. Then one morning, something strange happened. I heard voices, not cries, not sobs, but talking, soft and slow. I stepped outside and saw them. 3 strangers, covered in cloaks, faces hidden, travelers or survivors. They had a cart with sacks, barrels, food. They called out, "Trade, trade. We offer goods for labor." I didn't believe it at first, but they were real and alive and breathing. I ran inside, told Milda, told the children. We rushed to meet them. They asked if I could work. I said yes. Before they even finished the question, they gave me gloves and a mask soaked in vinegar and told me to help dig graves, the mass kind. We dug all day, 10, 20, maybe more. The ground was still hard, but the sun had begun to rise higher. It felt warm, and then they fed us. A thick stew, full of barley, turnip, even a scrap of meat. I wept, not from joy, not from relief, just because I remember what fullness felt like. Over the next days, they came and went, always wrapped, always cautious. Some said they were from the Abbey. Others said mercenaries. Some thought angels. I didn't care. They had food and tasks and rules. If you worked, you ate. If you were sick, you were left behind. Simple as that. Milda couldn't work. She was too weak. So I worked for her. And for the children, every ounce of strength I had, I gave. They gave us onions, and salted fish, dried beans, one day, even a slab of cheese. We lit candles at night again, and the children smiled for the first time in weeks, but it did not last. Nothing does. One of the travelers grew ill. He coughed, and the others panicked. They packed their cart and burned the sick man's body on a pyre. We watched from a distance as smoke curled into the sky. Then they left. No goodbyes, just gone. And once again, we were alone. Winter had begun to fade, but food was still short. The earth was not ready to give. Milda began coughing, a dry, hard cough, the kind that echoed in the ribs. She said it was nothing, but I knew better. I tried everything. I made teas from nettles. I brought her warm stones. I gave her my food, but her eyes grew dim, her breath shallow, and one night she asked me to sing to her like she had sung to the children. So I did. I sang the old song, the one her mother had taught her, the one she used to hum when she baked. And when I finished, she smiled, just once, then closed her eyes and did not open them again. Long pause. I buried her beneath the oak, the same tree where we used to lay in summer. I marked the grave with stones, not because I thought anyone would visit, but because I wanted to remember. After that, I no longer feared death, but I feared leaving the children. So I stayed. For them, I taught Rin to trap rabbits, taught Isbeth to dig for roots. We made a pact that we would survive together, even if the world forgot us, even if God turned away, we would endure. And in time, the winds began to soften, the trees grew buds, and the crows returned. Gentle voice. You might ask, why not give up? Why keep going? And I'd answer, because someone must remember. Someone must tell the story. And if not me, then who? But this is not the end. Not yet. There is more. The rebuilding, the choices I made, the people I met when I dared to walk beyond the woods, all that comes next. But for now, sleep. You are safe. And when you wake, I'll be here, waiting, to tell you how it all began. Again, part 3, the aftermath. Soft breath in, slow exhale. I did not expect to wake up the next day, but I did. And so did the children. And that was enough. The sun began to return. Slow, gentle, like a friend who had once left in anger, but now returned without a word. The snow melted from the thatch roofs. Little streams danced through the village paths. For the first time in months, there was color. Pale green moss, a single yellow flower, and hope. But survival has a strange taste. It's not sweet, it's not proud. It is quiet, almost numb, because after the fear is gone and the hunger fades, what remains is emptiness. We no longer wept. There were no more tears, only silence and ashes. I walked the village each morning, out of habit, out of duty. So many houses, cold and hollow, tools left in fields, chairs turned over, chalk marks on doors. The rats were gone. Even they had moved on. I found a few survivors. Old Barrick, who hadn't spoken in weeks. Young Toma, hiding in the bell tower. A washerwoman who thought I was a ghost. We nodded. but did not speak much. Words felt too heavy, too loud. Rin began to ask questions. What now, Papa? Where will we go? Is the plague really gone? I didn't know. But I told him, we go forward, we plant, we try again. Even if it all comes undone, we try. Because trying is all we have left. We turned over the earth, the same earth that once held the dead. Now, we asked it for life. It felt wrong, but also right. That spring, we planted onions, barley, even peas. The same peas that had once saved us. Isbet laid tiny seeds in neat rows. She hummed as she worked, a tune her mother used to sing. It made me close my eyes, just for a moment. One day, a rider came from the distant town. He wore colors, bright, foreign, too clean. He said the king's men were taking records, counting survivors, measuring loss. Loss cannot be measured, but we gave our names. He wrote them down without expression, then wrote on, like a shadow, like in memory. And still, the seasons moved. The river flowed again. The fields turned green. But everything was quieter now, as if the world remembered. We built new fences, fixed broken roofs, repaired the well. Rin learned to sharpen blades. Isbet learned to bake. We laughed again. Awkward, unsure, but laughter all the same. One morning, I saw smoke. Not from fire, but from ovens, far across the hills. Another village, alive. I felt my knees weaken, not from fear, but from relief. We were not alone. We visited them weeks later, brought bread, traded salt for cloth. They had stories, like ours. Worse, maybe, or better. They had also buried their dead. They had also wondered if morning would ever come. And yet, here they were. Here we were. Some days, I still see her. Milda, in dreams. She stands by the oak tree, hair loose, eyes gentle. She doesn't speak. She just looks at me. And I know that's enough. Sometimes I wonder, why us? Why did we survive when so many did not? Is there a reason? A purpose? Or was it just chance? The answer never comes. But I ask it anyway. Because to ask is to remember. And to remember is to honor. There is a boy now in the next village. He paints with mud and charcoal. Draws little figures on the church wall. One day, he drew a woman in a long cloak, standing in a field of bones. He called her Mother Plague, said she walks at night and chooses who to take. The elders scolded him, told him not to speak such things. But I did not, because maybe stories are the only thing left. Maybe they're how we carry what cannot be buried. They say the plague is gone, but I do not believe it. Not truly. It lives in silence, in empty chairs, in the way we listen more closely now to the sound of coughing. It lives in the soil, in memory, in the way children are taught to boil water, to burn clothes, to wash hands. Simple things, sacred things. But there is also this. We endured, not with swords, not with fire, but with patience and pain and love. That is what the plague could not take. That and the stories. And so I tell them, even now, to anyone who will listen, not to frighten, not to sadden, but to remember, because once We were on the edge of nothing. And somehow, we returned. Soft, slow voice. So now, lay down. Close your eyes. You are warm. You are fed. You are loved. The worst is behind you. Let the fire crackle. Let the wind hum through the window. You're safe now. And when you wake, there will be bread and sun and bird song, and I'll be here with more stories of how we fell and how we rose again and again.